8,000 miles from Manila, 11,000 seats, a crowd that shouldn't exist by the numbers alone. Alex Eala hasn't won a Grand Slam. She isn't even ranked inside the top 15 yet. So why does Cincinnati sound like a home final every single time she walks onto court? Tonight, against a former world number 3, we find out if the noise means anything at all, or if it's just noise.
There's a strange thing happening in professional tennis right now, and it doesn't show up in any ranking algorithm. It's the gap between where a player sits on paper and how loudly a stadium reacts when her name gets called. For most of the WTA Tour, those two things move together. The better you're ranked, the bigger your crowd. Alex Eala has broken that formula completely. She's 21, she's ranked in the world's top 20, seated 17th here in Cincinnati. Respectable, strong, but nowhere near the very top of the sport. And yet when she walks out for a third-round match, tournament organizers are dealing with crowd sizes that would be more appropriate for a semifinal featuring the top 2 seeds in the draw. 11,000 people, filling a venue in Mason, Ohio, a region where the entire Filipino population numbers only in the low thousands. The math simply doesn't add up, unless you understand what's actually happening underneath it. This is a fan base that travels. It's a fan base that organizes. Watch parties, ticket pools, entire friend groups flying in from other states just to watch a round of 32 match that, for almost any other player in the draw, would be a quiet afternoon session with a few hundred scattered fans in the stands. Eala's rise has created something tennis doesn't see often outside of its true legends, a following that seems to have outpaced the results, driven not by trophies but by something harder to define, the feeling of watching history happen in real time. Part of it is undeniably the tennis itself. 9 wins over top 10 opponents this season, a title in Washington where she beat 2 former world number 1s in a single week, a deep run in Toronto. These aren't lucky upsets. They're the foundation of a genuinely dominant season against elite competition, the kind of run that historically tends to build fan bases slowly over years, not months. But the speed of it is what makes this story unusual. In most sports, this level of grassroots, borderless support takes a career to build. For Eala, it's arrived inside a single season, and it raises real questions worth sitting with. Is this sustainable? Is it fair to opponents who suddenly find themselves playing what amounts to an away match on their own home soil? And most importantly, can a young player carry this kind of weight without it becoming a burden rather than a gift? Tonight, against Amanda Anisimova, a former world number 3 with 2 Grand Slam finals on her resume from last year alone, we get our clearest test yet of what the Eala phenomenon is actually built on. Here's where it gets genuinely uncomfortable for the player on the other side of the net. Amanda Anisimova isn't some overmatched wildcard entry facing a phenomenon for the first time. She is a 24-year-old American, playing in her own country, who reached back-to-back Grand Slam finals last year at Wimbledon and the US Open. By any conventional measure, she should be the crowd favorite tonight. She isn't. And she said as much herself before the match, admitting she expected the stadium to feel really packed, acknowledging with a kind of matter-of-fact honesty that she knew exactly whose crowd this would be. That's the trigger sitting at the heart of tonight's match. Not a rivalry, not bad blood, just the strange modern reality of a sport where popularity has started to operate independently of ranking, independently even of national boundaries. An American major finalist walks into an American tournament and becomes, functionally, the away player. Legendary coach Rick Massey framed tonight's match as a test, specifically calling it a great learning test for what it would reveal about Eala's ceiling against a proven power player capable of clean, lethal early strikes. It's a fair framing, but flip it around and the test cuts just as sharply toward Anisimova. Can a player who's been struggling for consistency all season find her explosive best in an environment that offers her absolutely no home court comfort? This is where the deeper conflict of the Eala phenomenon really starts to show itself. Crowd support is supposed to be an unambiguous positive, a gift for the player receiving it, harmless to everyone else. But when it grows this lopsided, this fast, it stops being neutral. It becomes a variable that opponents have to account for, a psychological weight that has nothing to do with the player's ranking or resume. Anisimova has to somehow quiet 11,000 people who never intended to be quieted. Eala has to somehow carry the responsibility of that many expectations without letting it change how she actually plays. Neither of them chose this dynamic. Both of them have to deal with it tonight. By fight night, the conversation has completely escaped the tennis world and turned into something bigger, a genuine cultural talking point. Local news outlets that arrived in Cincinnati expecting to cover routine tournament tennis instead find themselves reporting on crowd phenomena, on ticket resale prices spiking to semifinal levels for a third-round match, on flags and chants filling a stadium that logic says shouldn't be this full. Online, 2 very different conversations are happening at once. One side marvels at what Eala has built, genuine astonishment that a player without a Grand Slam title has generated support this fervent, this fast, this far from home. Comparisons circulate to other athletes across sports whose popularity seemed to outgrow their trophy case before the results fully caught up, a rare kind of stardom that usually only comes along once or twice in a generation. The other side raises a quieter, more uncomfortable point, sympathy for Anisimova, and genuine debate about whether this level of imbalance is healthy for the sport. Commentators openly wonder, live on air, whether a crowd this lopsided gives one player an unfair edge that has nothing to do with tennis ability, whether the WTA needs to start thinking about how popularity-driven crowds affect competitive fairness, the same way home field advantage gets discussed in other sports. Prediction models lean heavily toward Eala. One widely cited model puts her win probability at 62%, citing her superior recent form and what it calls a clear mental edge, while still cautioning that Anisimova remains a live threat capable of stretching the match deep into 3 sets. That numerical gap, 62 to 38, doesn't feel like it fully captures the emotional gap in that stadium tonight, and plenty of fans are pointing that out. What's undeniable is the reach of this story. People who don't follow tennis closely are tuning in tonight, not necessarily for the quality of shot making, but simply to witness the phenomenon itself, to see whether a crowd this large, this passionate, this far removed from the player's home country can possibly be real. That curiosity alone has turned an ordinary round of 32 match into appointment viewing.
Let's stay honest here, the way this channel always tries to be. This match hasn't concluded as this script is being put together, and manufacturing a fake result or invented meltdown would betray the trust you've put in this story. So instead, let's talk about the fallout that's already real, regardless of tonight's scoreline. For Anisimova, there's a growing, uncomfortable pattern forming in how her season gets discussed. Every match now gets measured against her spectacular 2025, 2 Grand Slam finals, a career trajectory that looked destined for the very top. A tough result tonight, in an environment already stacked against her, risks deepening a narrative she's clearly trying to outrun, that her peak may have already passed, and the sport's next generation is arriving faster than she can hold them off. For Eala, the fallout cuts differently, but no less seriously. When a fan base organizes travel, fills watch parties, and turns a third-round match into a cultural event, the emotional stakes climb to a level that has nothing to do with rankings or seeding. A loss tonight, however competitive, risks being framed by some as a letdown rather than simply part of a 21-year-old's natural development curve. That's an extraordinary amount of pressure for someone who, by any reasonable measure, is still early in her career. And there's a bigger, sport-wide fallout brewing too, a conversation tennis hasn't had to seriously reckon with in this exact way before. What happens when a player's popularity so dramatically outpaces her ranking that tournament organizers, broadcasters, and opponents all have to adjust around it? Is that good for the sport's growth, pulling in new audiences who might never have watched tennis otherwise? Or does it create a genuinely unfair dynamic that established stars now have to navigate purely because of geography and virality? Neither question gets resolved tonight, but both are part of the weight sitting on that court before a single point is played. Strip away the crowd noise, the prediction percentages, the cultural conversation, and what's left is the part of this story that actually gets decided honestly. 2 players, hitting a tennis ball, point after point, until someone wins. Eala's case is built on genuine substance, not just spectacle. 9 wins over top 10 players this season isn't a product of favorable draws or crowd energy. It's a product of a game that has repeatedly proven capable of dismantling elite competition under real pressure, against real Grand Slam champions, often in front of crowds far smaller and far less friendly than tonight's. Anisimova's case rests on proven ceiling. A player who reached 2 major finals in a single season has by definition shown she can raise her level against anyone alive when it matters most. The only open question is whether tonight, against this opponent, in this atmosphere, that ceiling reveals itself, or whether an inconsistent 2026 continues. That's the actual resolution this match offers, and it's a more honest one than any invented plot twist could provide. Proof, point by point, of where 2 very different careers currently stand. Not proof shaped by crowd size or ticket sales or viral clips, but proof shaped by execution when everything else gets stripped away. However tonight ends, something bigger than a single match result is already true. Alex Eala has changed what a small tournament round can look like. She's proven that a fan base can be built on substance and speed rather than decades of trophies. that geography and diaspora numbers don't actually cap how large or how loud support can grow when a player's story resonates this deeply. For Anisimova, whatever tonight brings, her story remains one of proven excellence at the highest level. 2 Grand Slam finals don't get erased by one difficult atmosphere in Ohio, regardless of how that crowd sounds. But maybe the real legacy question isn't about either player individually. It's about the sport itself. If crowds like tonight's become the norm rather than the exception, women's tennis may be entering an era where popularity and performance intertwine more tightly than ever before, where the biggest matches aren't always the ones between the highest seeds, but the ones that generate this kind of borderless, irrational, beautiful chaos. So here's the question worth sitting with long after tonight's result is known. Is the Alex Eala effect a passing phenomenon tied to one remarkable season, or is this genuinely the new blueprint for how stardom gets built in women's tennis? Let us know your take in the comments. And when we know how tonight actually played out, we'll bring you the real story. Subscribe now so you're here for it.